Hello, everyone. This is Brett. Thanks for tuning in to a new episode of Eclectic Playlist, where I'm going to show things that have been in rotation over the past week. Since it is October, Halloween month, we're going to stick to things more in a darker realm. And as always, I start off with some new releases. So let's kick things off with Firestarter. Huge Stephen King fan, also of John Carpenter. It's a popular thing to remake films, especially some of these classic horror films from the late 70s and the 80s. So I didn't really have a whole lot of faith in the movie, although being a huge Stephen King fan, I'm of course going to watch it. The movie was pretty lackluster, but the soundtrack, John Carpenter, his son Cody Carpenter, and godson Daniel Davies, who have been just doing such phenomenal work in their Lost Themes project, as well as a lot of the Halloween soundtracks. This is really cool. So first off, you can see these glowing eyes that are staring at you, and you probably saw when I had it at an angle that it is die cut, so when you pull out the sleeve, there you go. But the best part of that die cut sleeve is on the back with that lighter. Yeah, so very cool. So the record itself is on like a translucent yellow with, I think they call it bone splatter. And those center labels are really neat as well. So starts off kind of more minimal, more just kind of atmospheric, and it just builds, I guess like any movie plot does, it kind of builds to intensity, to a big climax at the end. Favorite track is the closer, the Firestarter end title, which is really dramatic. All these different types of guitar intervals just kind of moving up the neck. Very cool. So happy to have this in the collection. And the movie came out, I think it was, I feel like it was last year. And of course, with the backlog of record production, it finally hit the stores. All right, next up, Lou Reed, Words and Music. May 1965. This is on Light in the Attic, and Light in the Attic has been doing such a great job with the Nancy Sinatra catalog, with just beautiful, lush productions, really cool booklets. You got the OB strips on there, just really high quality pressings. So let me walk you through this because it has a really, really nice story. So there's the OB, really nice spine on it. This is Lou Reed Archive Series number 1, which tells us that there are going to be more. So all tracks on this previously unreleased. And let me guide you through this story here. So what happened was, after Lou Reed passed, he had an office in New York, and when they were going through the office, they were archiving all of his tapes and recordings, any musician that's been around as long as Lou Reed had all types of rarities and recordings and probably demos and live shows, alternate versions of songs. So when they were finishing up, they found this one envelope that was on a bookshelf that looks like this, because that's a reproduction of it. And they could see through it and see that it was a 1/4-inch reel-to-reel tape in there. So when they ended up playing it, they realized that it was something that was never heard before, never released. So May 1965, it was a recording of home demos that he recorded with John Cale, his partner, on the first 2 Velvet Underground records and Songs for Drella, etc. So it has, let me bring up that track listing on the back so you can see it. So you notice some familiar titles. I'm Waiting for the Man, Men of Good Fortune, Heroin, Pale Blue Eyes, Wrap Your Troubles in Dreams. Anyways, those are the ones familiar to me. And you also got some things like Too Late, Buttercup Song, Walk Alone, Buzz, 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 and Stockpile. So what you're hearing here are some of the most, the early versions of those songs that ended up becoming iconic Velvet Underground songs. I'm Waiting for the Man, Heroin. So you're hearing these really, really early versions. Pale Blue Eyes, which actually didn't end up getting recorded and released officially until the 3rd Velvet Underground album. Wrap Your Troubles in Dreams, which ended up getting recorded by Nico on her first solo album, Chelsea Girl. But there's no studio version of the Velvet Underground really doing it. Men of Good Fortune, which is misleading because If you're familiar with Lou Reed's third solo album, Berlin, from 1973, great album. Same title, but doesn't really share much similarity between it. Really early version of Heroin. So it's really quite fascinating. The booklet is the real star of this set. I mean, just sitting around reading this as you're listening to the recordings. You have essays in here talking about. Sorry, this booklet's really big, so it's a little hard to open it up. But you have essays that kind of chronicle how they found this tape, what they did with it, how they handled it. And then, the white glove treatment here on the tape. This is super cool. And then you have the credits for the tracks, and you have the lyrics, which is super fascinating. Will I be listening to this every week? No. But it is, because it's pretty primitive home demo recordings from 1965, so it wasn't like, artists nowadays just doing demos in GarageBand or Logic or Pro Tools, but going, straight to tape, and especially a tape that is now, approaching 60 years old. So it's a real fascinating look into early Lou Reed and Velvet Underground. So from like an archives perspective, it's certainly super cool to have this in the collection, and really fascinating to hear these versions of them. And the record itself, I didn't show that, but it has this an inner sleeve, and you can see the dots, kind of Roy Lichtenstein-esque, and the actual vinyl is on yellow, which kind of harkens the the Velvet Underground debut, the Banana album, Velvet Underground and Nico. All right, next up. Oh, and I'm curious to see what the next volume of that will be, since they labeled it #1. So obviously this is going to be a series of things from the archives. Next up, I think this one came out not this past Friday, but I think the week before. This is the new one from Bjork, Fosora. Double record, gatefold, beautiful. So I don't know, maybe it was a month ago they released a music video for it, and very intriguing. Really features like bass clarinet and clarinet, and then you have these like kind of electronic drums and strings, all these vocals. It seems very experimental. So I was a little on the fence about that. My initial, inclination was this is really fascinating, and I'd like to give it a try. So I just decided to grab it, and this record is so intriguing. Sonically, it is just beautiful. Lyrically, it seems to be thematically centered around kind of like human connection, kind of that longing for it. It's very hopeful, and it's a beautiful pressing. The songs themselves, very, very unique and intriguing. I followed Bjork all the way back when she was the singer of the Sugar Cubes, late 80s, early 90s. Some of her solo albums I've liked a lot more than others. But this one is just really pretty outstanding, and as I continue to listen to it, there's just so much to grab onto. It comes with a booklet that has the lyrics to it, and I also want to mention this as well, because I continue to read about pricing and just seeing it when going to the store, the pricing of records and the increasing of pricing. I just want to point out on this one that it is a double record. It is in a really high quality jacket. It has both records are in beautiful printed inner sleeves, really high quality, thick, with a book, and this was not even $23. On the other hand, you see some major label releases that are $40 that are 2 records, or even single records that are pushing over $30, and it's kind of ridiculous. But this one, not the case. So you have the lyrics to the songs, and I just wanted to point out one song in particular. It's the closing track. I found this to be very just a beautiful read when listening to it. The lyrics are just really pretty touching in spots. But this one in particular, called Her Mother's House, which is the album closer. When a mother wishes to have a house with space for each child, she is only describing the interior of her heart. Her most loved ones already live in the chambers of her heart. It's just really beautiful. So this album is powerful. I would not be surprised if it makes an appearance on my best albums of the year feature. So that is Bjork, Fasara. Okay, now let's go into the collection. First one up. This is Four Against Coalesce. This one came out a few months back. I had pre-ordered it almost a year before. Four Against, Lincoln, Nebraska. I guess you could categorize them. Dream pop, post-punk. You can see Echelons back behind me. They were originally on Independent Project Records. So this is their 2002 album. First time ever on vinyl. This was just released by Circle Social, which is a label, a little independent label that released Lycia's Wake, and it is run by the people from the band Softkill. I pre-ordered it like the second it went on sale, and this is the splatter version. It's like clear with black and white. Yeah, so Four Against, recommend you checking them out. All right, next up. Oh, such a great band. And there's some hope. I saw posted on social media. There's some stirrings that some things might be happening with Cranes. So this is their third album, Loved, from 1994. A lot of people became aware of Cranes when they toured in support of The Cure on the Wish tour back in 1992. You can see their second album, Forever, here. This is the music on vinyl, MOV pressing. They did a series of reissues of their first 4 albums, and then the EP collection, and then their first EP. So a lot of these should be in print. And they did these beautiful, like, waxy covers. They're kind of stamped, hand numbered. Well, not hand numbered, but they're numbered, stamped. Comes with an insert, has the credits and such. And then my particular copy is on this blue vinyl. So let's talk a little bit about the sound of the Cranes. Allison Shaw is the singer. I think her brother's Jim Shaw, who plays guitar. And it's such an interesting juxtaposition because her vocals are this real childlike, almost nursery rhyme-esque. And then the music is pretty dark and heavy, but not in a heavy, like, metal way, just like really brooding. What I really love about Cranes is the use of acoustic guitar, just kind of pulsing chords with pounding drums and just a lot of atmosphere. Great. Highly recommend any of their albums. Forever is the second one, as I mentioned. Wings of Joy is their 1991 debut. You can't go wrong with any of those. Cranes. All right, next up. Sarah had requested we put this on a few nights ago. Twist of Shadows. I know when we did a best albums of 1989, this was her favorite one. Clonazimax was a Dutch, I guess you could call them dark wave band. They initially came out on 4AD Records for their first album, and then also 1986's Medusa, their second record. So if someone asked me, I've had this conversation with friends, what's your favorite Clonazimax album? And usually I would always go with Medusa, but as the years pass, this one just keeps getting better and better for me. It has the song Imagination on it, which Anka sings, and it always makes me think of Book of Love, I Touch Roses, Boys, and there's just such a nostalgia to that song that just encapsulates for me the 1980s. It has the song, huge goth club song, Obsession. You have The River, Blind Hearts. Evelyn is the opening track. Yeah. So good. And they did one more album after this with the original lineup, which was Ronnie Moorings, Anka, and Peter Newton. They did 1991's Phoenix, and then Anka and Peter left, and Ronnie Moorings has continued the band on since. They continue to tour and release albums. But I also want to mention, because I brought up Peter Newton, and I want to point this album out as well. This is an album that Peter Newton from Xymox did with Michael Brook, kind of an ambient artist. Really well known for inventing what's known as the infinite guitar. And I remember reading about this years ago. It's a modification of a guitar where the sound just continues to just sustain infinitely. And he had a couple prototypes. One of them he gave to The Edge from U2, which was famously used on the Joshua Tree album, specifically on the song With or Without You. Is kind of that high sound you hear resonating throughout the song. And Michael Brook ended up also working on Peter Murphy's, in my opinion, his best album, 1995's Cascade. So anyways, this album right here came out in 1987, so while Peter was still in Clonazimax. And I discovered this years and years ago. It came out in 1987. And one song in particular, After the Call, which appears the year before on the Medusa album. And it has all these little instrumental segues, almost ambient, beautiful. I used to, go to sleep at night with this playing for a long time. And I have the CD copy. This is just one of those things that I kicked myself about because, before vinyl had its resurgence, I would often find the vinyl version of this in the used bins, and it'd be $8. And I'm like, oh, hold on, I'll get it next time, because the demand for vinyl was. And so I would get some new release, and I'll get it the next time. And then, of course, it disappears, and now it's very hard to find. So this is my well-loved copy on CD. So, highly recommend. In fact, I hope you're searching for this right now to grab it, because it's so good. So then we ended up playing Medusa as well. This has probably a couple more of Xymox's biggest songs. The closing track, Backdoor, which is one of those killer closing tracks. After the Call, as I mentioned, Agonized by Love, the song Louise, which is phenomenal. So, Clonazimax, Medusa. All right, couple more here. Dead Can Dance, this is their second album, 1985, Spleen and Ideal. Dead Can Dance, also on the 4AD label, if I didn't mention that about the first two Xymox records. Started off in Australia, relocated to England. Brendan Perry, Lisa Gerrard. And their first album, the self-titled one from the year before, was very, kind of tribal, really in the realm of kind of like what we would call goth rock, post-punk. This album, they took a departure in the next year. It became the word that I always think of is like cathedral-esque, just haunting, just very lush, orchestral, beautiful but ominous and dark at the same time. Really recommend this one. I end up pulling this one out a lot just because of the presence and the atmosphere that it kind of suspends you in. I'll be doing probably a Dead Can Dance ranking video in the near future, but highly recommend them. All right, and lastly here, this is Human Drama's debut album, Feel, also from 1989, like the Clonazimax, Twisted Shadows. So Human Drama, we were label mates with them on Project. They joined Project Records in the mid-90s after leaving. Their debut was on RCA, and then they left and they were on XXX Records for a while. Same label that brought us the first Jane's Addiction self-titled. And then they went on to Project Records for an album and an EP, and then released an album in 2002 with Project, same time our Going to the Theater came out. So we had done some shows with Human Drama back then. Johnny Indovina, who's on the cover there, principal songwriter, singer. They got their start in LA in the mid 80s, part of what's known as the scream scene. So they were playing alongside bands like Jane's Addiction, Guns N' Roses. Very dramatic. And their first album, Feel Here, was produced by Ian Brody. If that name sounds familiar, you'll recognize him because he was the founder and the singer of the Lightning Seeds. And he produced the first Velvet Underground, Echo and the Bunnymen album. Oh, representing Echo and the Bunnymen today, as a matter of fact. So this album, Feel, it has probably some of the most beloved Human Drama songs. The Waiting Hour in particular, which is just this kind of epic, highly dramatic, explosive, emotional track. Opening song, Death of an Angel, with that really significant 12-string acoustic guitar you hear. I Could Be a Killer, Dying in a Moment of Splendor, Heaven on Earth. Old Man, the cover of the Neil Young song, is also really stellar as well. So if you're unfamiliar with Human Drama, this is a great place to start, as well as their second album, The World Inside. And I think that wraps it up. All right, so let me know what you guys have been listening to. Did you pick up any of the new releases that I have here? You have any of these in your collection? Let me know. And I will see you soon. Goodbye.